South Africa in the 1950s. This was a country and a time where the races were strictly segregated by law. The infamous policy of apartheid was designed to maintain white supremacy and the purity of the white race. It was here that this young girl, Sandra Laing, grew up. She found herself an unwitting victim of this system, and her case became notorious throughout the world. It turned on the fact that although Sandra clearly looks mixed race, by a quirk of nature, her parents were in fact white. In a profoundly conservative society, where the races were strictly separated, nothing could have been more shocking or more problematic for her family. It simply wasn't an option for a child to be a different colour from its parents. Sandra Laing found herself on the wrong side of history. The contradictions of apartheid tore her family and her future apart. This is Sandra Laing today. Her life has been an epic tale of survival against tragedy, isolation and violence. So this is the extraordinary story of how a small, skin-deep difference shattered her life. This is the story of Sandra Laing. Under the South African system of apartheid, everyone was officially classified as belonging to one particular race group. People of different races were not allowed to use the same public facilities. They were not allowed to have sex, marry, or even live in the same areas. All the best jobs were strictly reserved for white people. Segregation was as near total as the government could make it. The story of Sandra Laing was one of the most extreme examples of the madness and brutality of that system. Sandra Laing is taking us back today to see where it began, far away from South Africa's cities, in a highly conservative rural part of northeastern South Africa, where her parents ran 2 trading stores. Accompanied by South African journalist and friend Michael Atwell, Sandra is taking us on a journey to the places where her life unfolded and to tell us what happened there. Growing up in this isolated environment, Sandra had little awareness of her colour. Her parents appear to have accepted it without comment or discussion, and they were clearly a happy family. She had a younger brother, Adrian, who was also mixed race in appearance, but again this was never referred to. In 1962, when Sandra was 6, her carefree childhood was to be shattered forever. This is the small town of Piet Retief near Sandra's home. She also had an older brother who was attending boarding school here, and she was now sent to join him. The school's campaign against Sandra lasted 4 years, a very long time in a child's life. In 1966, they finally triumphed. When she was 10, the government changed her race classification from white to coloured or mixed race. And that had an instant dramatic effect.
I was in my classroom and then Mr. Van Tonder sent somebody to come and call me. He wants to see me in his office. And then I went to his office and I found 2 policemen there. And then he said to me, I must go with these policemen. They are taking me home. Then I asked him why. He just said to me, I must ask my parents.
We just heard that they said, no, she was declared a black person and blacks are not allowed to be in the school with whites, and that is why they were removed. And that's why she was taken out of school. I think it was a very big shock for her brother. He didn't speak about it, and it was very upsetting. But he was allowed to stay at school. He didn't leave school. He stayed there.
Sandra's case was particularly brutal. But reclassification was by no means unusual.
There were roughly 2,000 people a year who were reclassified according to race from one racial group to another. And probably this started from the very beginning, 1950, right up until 1989.
Every year, the Minister of Home Affairs would officially list the reclassifications in Parliament.
And he would say 10 whites were reclassified as coloreds, 6 Indians were reclassified as Chinese, 3 Chinese were reclassified as Malays, and the list would just go on and on. We have these statistics, and there were literally, the final sentence of this was, no blacks were classified as white, and no whites were reclassified as black.
The dramatic circumstances of Sandra Lang's reclassification soon attracted national and even international criticism, and considerable media attention became focused on her. The impact was so great that more than 40 years later, local people still remember the case.
Do you remember her?
Yes, I remember
Who is this lady?
her. Sandra Laing.
And what do you remember about her?
No, she had a terrible life.
Really?
Tell you, it's like that, isn't it? Yeah. Sandra, it is. I know.
What happened to her?
She went to school here in Pittertief at the primary school. And then...
What was the problem?
There were problems,
the
colour problem.
Yeah. Well, we felt sorry for you because it was a terrible story. You can't do anything to it. You couldn't do anything, we couldn't do anything. Eh?
Sandra's reclassification, which caused such controversy, had huge implications.
This is my mother, and here I was 11 years old.
So this was just after you'd been expelled from the school?
Yeah.
When you were growing up, did you regard yourself as a white person? Did you have any sense of colour?
I didn't worry about colour. I was just happy and playing with my friends. But when I got older, then I did see this. I was not the same as my parents. And
After Sandra's expulsion from school, her father embarked on a high-profile public campaign to try and get her reclassified back to white. But there was now real stress within the family. Her parents could no longer avoid the question of why she was a different colour. An obvious possibility was that Mrs. Lang might have had a sexual liaison with a black man. At that time, also a serious crime.
Do you think it's at all likely that she had had a relationship with another man?
no, I don't think so, no, she didn't.
If Mrs. Lang hadn't had a relationship with another man, the most likely explanation for Sandra's skin colour must be genetics.
For Sandra Lang to have been conceived of white-looking parents is not any magic. It is based purely on the assortment of genes that each parent would have carried that is responsible for the production of pigment that defines skin color. So if one of the parents had an ancestor who was African, it is very possible by pure statistics of how she inherited her genetic pool from mom and dad, that she would have carried a gene that could produce more pigment, giving her a darker skin color. Because 1 in 10 white South Africans has at least one African ancestor. And it's as common as that.
Do you think your father was embarrassed in some way by you, or do you think he genuinely loved you?
I think my father did love me. My father always told the newspaper people when they come that I'm his child. And he loved me, and he trying me to have a better life.
1 year after Sandra's expulsion, her father's public campaign to have her classified back to white finally succeeded. The government, embarrassed by the huge public scandal, changed the law to say that a child had to be the same colour as its parents.
And in Parliament today, an amendment was made to the Population Registration Act. Descent rather than appearance will be the determining factor in all classification cases. Children must now be classified the same race as their parents.
Sandra's reclassification back to white meant she now had her third racial identity. So here, back at her Brereton Park home, things seemed to return to normal. But then, events took another dramatic turn. She met a man, a black man, Petrus Swane.
He was attractive and he was very friendly. And we were friends at first, always talking to him until we went out with him. And then my father found out, and he was very angry.
Why was he angry?
My father didn't like black people.
2 years after meeting Petrus, at the age of 16, Sandra's life took another fateful turn. She decided to elope with him. She had no idea of the profound consequences this would have.
Sandra had no choice. There was nothing her father could do to make her white. Sandra couldn't be white. Sandra would never have fitted into a white society. It's no use having an ID that says you're white when everything you experience with people is that I'm not white and that I'm accepted by other people, by black people. So the fact that Sandra ran away is just the most logical thing to have happened.
After they eloped, Petrus took Sandra across the nearby border to Swaziland, where there was no apartheid. But the couple were arrested for illegal entry and sent back to prison in South Africa. Petrus was released, but Sandra remained in jail for 3 months. But in gaining a black family, Sandra was to lose her white one. Her father cut off all further contact, and she never saw him again.
Can you understand her father's point of view?
I think it does show you how strong racial issues were, that he would have to overcome his love for his own child and put that aside. And he clearly did love her. And that the laws and apartheid were stronger than that. And that is, to me, is the real tragedy.
He couldn't blame the system because he believed in the system. He voted for the system. So the only person he could blame was Sandra. And then he kept her mother away from her. I think Sandra's mother must have been just as shocked and just as upset. But you know what mothers are like. They're more forgiving and they're more accepting. But I think that's where her father drew the line. Is to him, he felt he had done so much, she had thrown that back in his face, and he felt humiliated and betrayed.
Once Sandra Lang's father had rejected her for eloping with a black man, she was destined to embark on a long journey through the entire spectrum of the black South African experience. It began when she and Petrus set up home here, close to his mother. Sandra was totally unequipped for her new life. Hardly had Sandra settled down to her new life when apartheid caught up with her again. She and Petrus became victims of an infamous policy by which blacks were forcibly driven from their homes, something she'd never have suffered, of course, if she'd remained white.
The effect of the Group Areas Act on Kromkrans is that it was reclassified as a white area. And then, all the black people who were living in that area were forcibly removed to other areas. And what happened from the 50s right through to the 70s was one of the largest processes of forced removals in the world, where millions of people were uprooted and forcibly removed. And I think that is one of the ways of fundamentally destroying people psychologically.
Sandra and Petrus were now forced to abandon their home. Sandra is taking us to see the place 30 miles away where they resettled. In 1977, one of South Africa's most distinguished photographers, David Goldblatt, went to photograph her.
I visited her at a resettlement camp in what was then the Eastern Transvaal. She was living with a black man. If I remember correctly, she had 2 children with him, and they had established a little shop when I came there. It was very recently established, physically big, shy. I think she'd come to accept that she was an object of interest. I don't think she gloried in it. She simply accepted it, that she was a person of some interest to the rest of the world. As far as I can recall, she had virtually cut off all relations with the family, but I think there was still some unofficial or surreptitious contact either with the mother or the father. I'm not sure. I don't remember.
The mother.
It was the mother. And she seemed to treasure that, if I remember rightly.
When I got my eldest son, Henry, and then I went back to my mother and go show her the baby. And she was glad to see us, but she said that I mustn't let my father found me there because my father was very angry. After that, she said to me, I mustn't come again.
Sandra was worried that because she was officially a different race from her children, they might be taken away. So during this period, she applied to be reclassified back to coloured. But now, perversely, the authorities refused.
I had to leave Petrus because he was every day hitting me, and I just thought that if I don't go, he's going to kill me.
In due course, Sandra had a 3rd child, another boy, Prince, by a short-lived relationship. But life wasn't getting any easier for her. When Sandra was wrongly suspected of having cancer and she had to go into hospital, there was no one to care for her 3 children. The authorities took them away and fostered them out. Kwatema marked perhaps the lowest point in Sandra's life. No partner, no job, no money, and now no children. Around her, the world was also troubled. In townships like these, black agitation against apartheid was gathering force, and white power beginning to buckle. Little did Sandra know it at the time, but this period was actually the beginning of a long, slow turnaround in her life. Now 26, she got her first steady job here at a local cosmetics factory. In part, this was due to her now succeeding in becoming coloured again. This, her 4th racial identity, meant she was now the same race as her children. But it also helped her get a job here, because the factory employed mainly coloured workers.
I started working here in 1981. The kids was at the welfare in Boksburg, and then I had to find a job to support myself and take something for them every month or so. Then I worked here for 7-8 years. I was working at the lipstick, making lipstick. And it was a nice place to work. All the people are friendly.
Today, because of her story, Sandra is something of a minor celebrity in South Africa. Her former colleagues still regard her with warmth and affection.
How are you, Sandra? Okay. Alles is okay?
Alles is all right.
Sandra,
Werk jullie nog wel right?
ja. Hey, wie bekend bij deze?
Niks. Maak het schoon. Was goed was, schoon maken.
Hoor je het niet, hoor. Die onze plek is prachtig. En
While at Vanda, Sandra's fortunes also improved in another direction. She finally met a man who was to provide her with the stability that she so needed.
She was working next to my company, so I met her there by that time. So I speak to her, we understand each other, then we come together till today.
I just knew maybe he was going to be the one who will look after me and won't abuse me like my first husband.
With both Sandra and Johannes working, they could eventually afford a proper house. Although now derelict, this rented home marked a big improvement in accommodation. And in the late 80s, a decade after her children had been fostered out, she could finally get them back.
It's that time when I got Henry and Elsie and Prince back from the welfare. I told the welfare that I've got a rented house and I've got somebody, my partners, supporting me. Then they said it's all right. And then the welfare let them come back to me.
And by now she had 2 more children. The older Anthony as a result of an earlier short relationship, and the younger Steve by Johannes.
When I got the children back from the welfare, it was the first time that I was living with them, all 5 of them here in this house.
In the 1990s, their fortunes still improving, the family moved further upmarket to this rented house. And it was here that Sandra received an unexpected windfall. In the year 2000, a British film director, moved by her story, decided to make the feature film about her life. This was to bring her recognition and unprecedented security.
I think you can't take on board a story like Sandra's without wanting to make some kind of difference to the person at the center of that story. And one of the first ways in which I was able to do that was that I negotiated a good advance, which I was able to hand over to Sandra. And with that money, she was able to buy her first home and set herself up. And the idea of home is central to one's sense of self and security. And I knew that owning her own home would make a big difference to her own self-confidence.
Today, Sandra's life has been greatly enhanced by her unexpected celebrity. Tony Fabian has spent the last 10 years working with her and is now a close friend.
I've come to do some promotional stuff for the film with Sandra.
So, how's Sandra been?
I think Sandra is completely transformed. I mean, from the first time that I met her to the present, seeing somebody much more confident, much more at ease, happy in her own skin, surrounded by family. There's a general sense of well-being.
And family, that institution which so blighted her life, is also now Sandra's greatest achievement. Today, 4 of her 5 children are married, and she has 7 grandchildren. They all live close to her, and as is evident, they are a devoted and loving extended family.
She's a grown woman who had very many trials and struggles in her life and can look back, I would imagine, on her life at this point with a certain degree of pride that she managed to find her way through these very difficult experiences, that she managed to transcend divisions in society, other people's biases and racist assumptions, and create a life for herself, and a very successful life. And I think that's evident in the fact that she has caring relationships with her own children and her own extended family.
But Sandra's life can never be completely whole. Her father died in 1988 without her ever seeing him again, and this remains a great sadness for her.
I think for her there's a lot of unresolved grief linked to her father, because she could never speak to her father. She could never have that opportunity to have a conversation where she could explain her actions or try and get his understanding or ask for his forgiveness.
But what about Sandra's mother? Sandra knew nothing of her mother's fate at all until in 2001, a journalist found her still alive and living in Pretoria. It was an emotional reunion for the first time in nearly 30 years. Later, Sandra was able to introduce this white woman to her brown family. Although this represented a form of closure for Sandra, there remains one piece of unfinished business: her brothers. She hasn't seen them since she eloped with Beatrice in 1971. Both are still alive, but they refuse to meet her or even to acknowledge her as their sister. They also declined to take part in this film.
Many people don't understand why the brothers don't want to reunite with Sandra. I think the reasons are complex. The brothers feel that Sandra has used her story as a cottage industry, that they've been brought into the public eye unwillingly by Sandra. And in that sense, they feel resentful. On the other hand, I don't see what choice Sandra had. Her story was all she had to sell. And Leon Laing, who looked white, in a way feels less threatened by his association with Sandra than Adrian, who is also colored or mixed race. And yet he's living in a white community with a white wife, white children, as far as I know. I haven't seen them. And he feels that an association with Sandra puts into question his own whiteness. So he feels more threatened by the idea of reconnecting with her. And it's very, very sad.
Sandra Laing and her family may still have unresolved issues from the past, but South Africa itself has moved on. In 1994, the white minority gave up power and apartheid came to an end. Today, South Africa is fully democratic and very different from the strictly segregated country it once was. All races mix freely, and apartheid now feels very distant.
Ik heb die school gelopen van graad 1 af. Toen ik 11 jaar oud was. Toen hulle my uitgezet. Toen mag ik niet weer school lopen.
Sandra, just want to tell you that don't feel ashamed of yourself that you're welcome in the school to bring your children or something, and the school has changed. It's changed very much, and it's very nice. It's a very nice school. We learned very quickly things, and
whenever we have a fight with any Afrikaans children, white children, then the teachers always help us and they tell us that color doesn't matter, we're all the same, and that we must just be friends, and that it wasn't how it used to be many years ago.
Was maar alle jare 'n goeie skool. Is maar nog niet terug van die apartheid wat ons so gemaak het. Maar het is 'n goeie skool.
You're really strong to handle these things you've done. And I just want to tell you that we all love you, Sandra. Sandra, wil net iets sê vir jou. Goed in hierdie wêreld change. And long-term things have been changed, and next time we will carry the world. Try and make it more happier.
Ek is maar net hartseer omdat ek nou vir julle gesien het en ek was julle ouderdom toe ek uitgesit is. Maar is nou alright. Ek het nou maar getroud en ek het my eie huis en kinders. Alles is nou weg.